Children who enter this world with autism often represent such elevated spiritual journeys, souls who have chosen a particular vehicle of expression, not as punishment or random occurrence, but as deliberate messengers of profound spiritual wisdom. The spiritual understanding of autism transcends the clinical definitions and diagnostic criteria of modern medicine. These souls arrive with intact spiritual wisdom, yet they communicate through different channels than what society has deemed normal. Their purpose extends far beyond what is immediately visible to the untrained eye. According to spiritual teachings, these children do not come into families by accident. They are carefully placed where their unique energy and consciousness can catalyze the greatest spiritual growth. They arrive as teachers in the most unexpected form, often nonverbal, sometimes detached from conventional social interactions, yet profoundly connected to spiritual realms that most have forgotten how to access. The higher purpose of these souls becomes evident when we observe the transformation they inspire in those around them. Parents and siblings of children with autism often report extraordinary spiritual awakenings, a deepened capacity for unconditional love, patience that transcends human limitations, and compassion that extends far beyond their immediate circumstances. These children come to shatter our preconceptions of what constitutes value in human experience. In a world obsessed with achievement, productivity, and conventional success, they silently demonstrate that being, rather than doing, carries immeasurable spiritual significance. Their presence alone invites us to question our values and recognize the divine spark that exists regardless of cognitive function or social adaptation. Edgar once spoke of such souls as volunteers, advanced beings who choose difficult earthly circumstances to help elevate human consciousness. From this perspective, autism represents not a disorder, but a different ordering of consciousness, one that prioritizes direct spiritual connection over social conformity. These souls maintain closer ties to the divine source, often sacrificing ease of earthly communication for preservation of their spiritual awareness. The higher purpose of these children is multifaceted. First, they serve as bridges between material and spiritual dimensions, maintaining access to frequencies of consciousness that most adults have long forgotten. Their apparent detachment from conventional reality often masks an extraordinary attunement to subtle energies, universal patterns, and spiritual truths. Second, they act as mirrors, reflecting back our own spiritual limitations. When faced with a child who does not respond to social cues in expected ways, we are forced to examine our attachments to specific forms of communication and connection. In their presence, our spiritual immaturity is often revealed, our impatience, our narrow definitions of intelligence, our conditional love. Third, these souls serve as catalysts for collective spiritual evolution. Their increasing presence in our world is no coincidence, but rather a response to humanity's urgent need for awakening. They arrive in greater numbers during times of spiritual crisis, serving as reminders of what has been forgotten in our rush toward material progress. The spiritual dimensions of autism often become apparent in the child's extraordinary sensitivities. Many display unusual responses to sensory stimuli, overwhelming distress at certain sounds or textures, or profound calm in environments that align with higher vibrational frequencies. These reactions hint at their heightened spiritual perception, their awareness of energetic qualities imperceptible to most. Parents who approach their child's autism from this spiritual perspective often report profound shifts in their own consciousness. Rather than viewing their situation as a burden or tragedy, they recognize the sacred opportunity presented, the invitation to evolve beyond limited perceptions and enter into communion with a soul that operates at different frequencies of awareness. This perspective does not diminish the very real challenges faced by families. Rather, it infuses those challenges with meaning and purpose. The daily struggles become opportunities for spiritual practice, moments to transcend ego, surrender control, and develop unconditional presence with what is. The spiritual mission of these children extends through generations. Their impact ripples outward from immediate family to extended relatives, communities, and eventually, collective consciousness. Each moment of acceptance, each adaptation made to accommodate their different way of being, represents a small but significant shift toward a more spiritually awakened world. In embracing the higher purpose of these souls, we begin to recognize that they have not come to be fixed or normalized, but rather to fix our normalized perception of what constitutes wholeness, intelligence, and spiritual advancement. They teach us, through their very being, that the divine expresses itself through infinite variations, and that our limited human categorizations fail to capture the vast spectrum of sacred expression. Within the spiritual framework of existence, family systems represent more than biological connections. They are intricate webs of karmic relationships, energy patterns that have often persisted across multiple lifetimes. The arrival of a child with autism frequently serves as a powerful catalyst for breaking deeply entrenched karmic cycles that may have dominated a family lineage for generations. These special souls often incarnate specifically into families where cycles of unconsciousness need to be disrupted. They arrive with a spiritual mission to interrupt patterns of egoism, violence, disconnection, or spiritual stagnation that have become normalized within the family system. Their presence makes it impossible for these patterns to continue unchallenged, as they demand a complete recalibration of family dynamics. Consider the family accustomed to superficial relationships, where members interact primarily through social masks and conditioned responses. The child with autism, unable or unwilling to participate in these inauthentic exchanges, creates an immediate disruption. Their authentic presence, sometimes expressed through silence, sometimes through unconventional behaviors, renders the family's established patterns of interaction ineffective and exposes their spiritual emptiness. Similarly, in families dominated by materialism and external achievement, the child with autism introduces values that transcend conventional success metrics. Their presence shifts attention from acquisition and accomplishment to qualities like presence, acceptance, and unconditional love. The spiritual priorities that may have been neglected for generations suddenly move to the forefront of family consciousness. The karmic breaking point often comes through crisis, when a family's established coping mechanisms prove inadequate for embracing the child's different way of being. A spiritual emergency arises. This crisis point represents the crucial moment where transformation becomes possible, where old patterns can be released and new, more evolved approaches can emerge. Many spiritual traditions speak of karma not as punishment, but as opportunity, the precise circumstances needed for souls to evolve beyond their current limitations. From this perspective, the challenges presented by raising a child with autism represent perfectly calibrated spiritual assignments. Each meltdown, each communication barrier, each unexpected behavior serves as an invitation to transcend ego-based reactions and access deeper wells of patience, creativity, and unconditional acceptance. The breaking of karmic patterns often manifests in specific ways within family systems. A family history of controlling behaviors meets its counterpoint in a child who cannot be controlled through conventional means. Generational patterns of emotional suppression encounter their antithesis in a child whose emotional expressions know no social boundaries. Ancestral tendencies toward intellectual judgment face their dissolution when confronted with a child whose intelligence operates outside conventional parameters. Perhaps most significantly, these children disrupt the fundamental karmic pattern of conditional love that permeates human relationships. In requiring love that embraces their complete authentic being, without the expected social responses that typically reward parental affection, they challenge the very foundation of ego-based love. Parents and siblings are invited into a purified form of love that expects nothing in return, that embraces without requiring reciprocity in familiar forms. The transformation rarely comes easily. Families often move through stages of resistance, grief, and struggle before arriving at spiritual surrender. These stages themselves represent the necessary dismantling of karmic patterns, the breaking down of ego defenses, the releasing of attachment to particular outcomes, the surrender of the illusion of control. Through this alchemical process, the family system undergoes profound reconfiguration. What emerges on the other side of this transformation is often a family system operating at a higher spiritual frequency. Where disconnection once prevailed, authentic presence emerges. Where judgment dominated, acceptance flowers. Where rigid expectations once structured interactions, flexible responsiveness becomes the new foundation. The karmic debt of generations begins to be balanced through this profound spiritual reorientation. The child with autism serves as both the catalyst and the guide for this transformation. They remain steadfast in their authentic being, unwilling to compromise their spiritual integrity to fit within dysfunctional family systems. Their persistence, often misinterpreted as stubbornness or defiance, represents their unwavering commitment to their spiritual mission of transformation. The breaking of karmic patterns extends beyond immediate family interactions to touch ancestral healing. Many parents report spontaneous insights into generational trauma while raising children with autism, suddenly understanding patterns of behavior that have roots in grandparents or great-grandparents. The child's presence illuminates the family shadow, bringing to consciousness what has remained hidden for generations. This karmic disruption operates at the energetic level as well. Families often report shifts in the very atmosphere of their homes, a clearing of heavy emotional residue, a lightening of the energetic environment. As old patterns dissolve, the vibrational frequency of the family system naturally elevates, creating space for more evolved ways of relating and being. The spiritual work of breaking karmic patterns through raising a child with autism represents some of the most advanced soul work possible in human experience. It demands complete presence, radical acceptance, and the courage to release deeply ingrained patterns of thought and behavior. Those who undertake this journey, whether as parents, siblings, or extended family, are engaged in healing that extends far beyond the individual, touching collective consciousness itself. In recognizing the karmic breaking function of these children, families can approach challenging behaviors not as problems to be eliminated, but as precisely calibrated spiritual interventions, each one designed to address specific patterns of unconsciousness. This perspective transforms daily struggles into sacred opportunities for liberation from cycles that have limited spiritual growth for generations. The spiritual perspective on autism invites us to consider a profound possibility: that many individuals with autism experience heightened spiritual sensitivity, an awareness of dimensions, energies, and spiritual realities that remain largely imperceptible to neurotypical consciousness. This sensitivity represents not a deficiency, but an extraordinary gift, albeit one that can create significant challenges in navigating the dense material world. When viewed through this spiritual lens, many characteristics commonly associated with autism take on deeper significance. The overwhelming sensory experiences, the aversion to certain sounds, textures, or lights may reflect an inability to filter out the energetic components that underlie physical stimuli. What appears as hypersensitivity in the material realm may actually represent an expanded perception that includes the energetic and spiritual dimensions of ordinary objects and environments. Many spiritual traditions have long recognized that consciousness exists on a spectrum, with some individuals naturally attuned to subtle energies and non-physical realities. In indigenous cultures, such individuals were often identified early and trained as shamans, healers, or spiritual intermediaries. Their different way of perceiving reality was recognized as a gift rather than a deficit, a direct line to wisdom beyond ordinary consciousness. The spiritual sensitivity of individuals with autism often manifests in their relationship with nature. Many display profound connections to animals, plants, or natural environments, connections that transcend conventional understanding. This affinity may reflect their ability to perceive the consciousness that permeates all living things, to communicate on non-verbal energetic levels that most humans have forgotten how to access. Similarly, the intense focus on particular objects or subjects, often labeled as special interests, may represent a spiritual attunement to the deeper significance of these elements. What appears as obsession from the outside may actually be a recognition of spiritual patterns or energetic properties contained within these objects or topics. The individual with autism may be drawn to certain things precisely because they resonate at frequencies that align with their heightened spiritual perception. Perhaps most telling is the relationship many individuals with autism have with silence and solitude. Their preference for quiet, minimally stimulating environments may reflect a natural contemplative orientation, an intuitive understanding that spiritual perception flourishes in the absence of sensory overload. What appears as social withdrawal may actually represent a turning toward inner dimensions of experience that offer richer, more meaningful engagement than conventional social interaction. The communication differences observed in autism may also reflect this spiritual sensitivity. Nonverbal individuals, or those with unconventional language patterns, may be operating from consciousness states where linear, sequential verbal communication feels inadequate or constraining. Their silence may contain not an absence of communication, but a presence so vast that ordinary language cannot contain it. From spiritual traditions worldwide comes the understanding that higher consciousness often manifests as simplicity, directness, and freedom from social pretense. The characteristic literal communication style of many individuals with autism, their difficulty with deception, social manipulation, or hidden agendas, may reflect a soul that refuses to participate in the layers of inauthenticity that characterize much of human interaction. This spiritual sensitivity creates significant challenges in a world that does not recognize or accommodate it. Environments designed for neurotypical processing, with their cacophony of sensory stimuli, rapid pace, and emphasis on verbal exchange, can create overwhelming distress for those whose perception includes additional layers of awareness. What appears as dysfunction may actually be an appropriate response to perceiving more than the environment was designed to acknowledge. Families who recognize this spiritual dimension often report discovering that their children respond positively to energy healing modalities, sacred music, or environments with harmonious energy. Many children who struggle in conventional settings thrive in natural environments, sacred spaces, or in the presence of spiritually attuned individuals. These responses suggest that their systems recognize and resonate with higher vibrational frequencies, even when they cannot articulate this connection verbally. The extreme spiritual sensitivity of these souls often manifests in what might be called energy hygiene, their strong reactions to environments, people, or situations with discordant energies. What appears as behavioral problems may actually represent their system's natural resistance to energetic pollution, to the unconscious emotional states, conflicting intentions, or spiritual disconnection that permeates many human environments. Parents and caregivers who approach autism with this understanding often discover that addressing the energetic and spiritual dimensions of their children's experience produces profound shifts. Creating environments with coherent energy, practicing personal spiritual centeredness, and acknowledging the validity of their children's perceptions can transform daily interactions. When the heightened sensitivity is honored rather than pathologized, new possibilities for connection emerge. This perspective does not deny the neurological differences present in autism, but rather suggests that these differences serve a spiritual function. They maintain access to dimensions of reality that typical neurology tends to filter out. The characteristic brain development in autism may represent not a mistake, but an adaptation specifically designed to preserve spiritual perception, even at the cost of conventional functioning. The spiritual sensitivity of individuals with autism offers profound gifts to our collective evolution. In their presence, we are reminded of dimensions beyond the material, of modes of knowing beyond the rational, of connections beyond the verbal. They stand as living embodiments of what many spiritual practices strive to cultivate: direct perception unmediated by conceptual thinking, immediate presence unmarred by social conditioning, and authentic being unconstrained by conventional expectations. Throughout history, mystics and spiritual adepts have described states of consciousness characterized by unity perception, transcendence of ordinary boundaries, and direct communion with the divine. Many individuals with autism seem to naturally access aspects of these states, though without the conceptual framework to translate their experience into terms recognizable by conventional spirituality. The recognition of this extreme spiritual sensitivity invites a radical shift in how we approach autism, moving from a deficit model focused on normalizing to an expansive model focused on translating between different modes of perception. Rather than asking individuals with autism to abandon their unique spiritual sensitivity to fit into conventional reality, we might instead develop our own perception to better comprehend the dimensions they naturally access. This spiritual understanding does not eliminate the very real challenges faced by individuals with autism and their families. Rather, it infuses these challenges with meaning, and offers new avenues for connection and support. By honoring the spiritual sensitivity at the core of the autistic experience, we open possibilities for integration that respect rather than suppress the profound gifts these souls bring to our world. The spiritual significance of children with autism extends beyond their individual purpose to encompass two profound dimensions: the spiritual evolution of their parents and caregivers, and the transformation of collective consciousness. These interconnected aspects reveal how these special souls catalyze healing and awakening that ripples outward from individual families to society as a whole. For parents and primary caregivers, receiving a child with autism initiates a spiritual journey of exceptional depth and intensity. This path often begins with resistance, the natural human reaction to circumstances that challenge our expectations and perceived limitations. Many parents report experiencing a period of grief, confusion, or even anger as they reconcile the child before them with the future they had imagined. This initial struggle represents the necessary dismantling of ego structures, the beginning of a profound spiritual initiation. As parents move beyond initial resistance, they enter a phase of spiritual surrender that few other life experiences demand with such totality. This surrender involves releasing not only expectations for their child, but deeply held beliefs about parenting, success, happiness, and the nature of love itself. They begin to recognize that conventional approaches to child rearing, based on social conditioning and external milestones, must give way to a more intuitive, present-centered orientation. Through this surrender emerges what many spiritual traditions identify as the core of spiritual development: the capacity for selfless service. Parents of children with autism often discover depths of giving they never imagined possible, sustaining attention, care, and presence far beyond conventional parenting demands. This service becomes not merely an obligation, but a spiritual practice in itself, cultivating qualities of patience, presence, and unconditional love that transform the parent at the level of soul. The spiritual growth extends to developing extraordinary discernment, learning to distinguish between the essential and the non-essential. Parents describe how their child's autism stripped away societal pretenses and cultural conditioning, leaving only what truly matters: authentic connection, unconditional acceptance, and the sacred quality of presence itself. What once seemed important, social status, material achievement, external validation, often falls away as parents align with deeper values revealed through their relationship with their child. Perhaps the most profound aspect of this parental journey involves transcending the limited identification with personal ego. Many parents describe experiences of surrendering their individual identity as they attune completely to their child's needs and rhythms. This dissolution of boundaries, though challenging, creates openings for mystical experience, for direct knowing that transcends intellectual understanding. Parents often report moments of pure communion with their child that exist beyond words, beyond conventional parent-child dynamics. The spiritual awakening of parents often extends to healing their own childhood wounds. In meeting their child's needs with the presence and acceptance they themselves may not have received, many parents experience profound healing of generational patterns. The unconditional love they learn to offer their autistic child becomes a balm for their own unmet childhood needs, creating healing that spans generations. This parental journey represents not a burden, but an accelerated path of spiritual evolution, one that develops qualities that might otherwise require decades of dedicated spiritual practice. The intensity of the experience, its demands for complete presence and surrender, and its confrontation with fundamental human questions about meaning and purpose, create conditions perfectly designed for spiritual transformation. Beyond the individual family, children with autism serve a collective spiritual mission of extraordinary significance for our time. Their increasing presence in human experience is not random, but represents a coordinated spiritual response to humanity's urgent need for awakening. They arrive as ambassadors of a different way of being, one that challenges our culture's excessive materialism, disconnection from nature, and prioritization of intellectual knowledge over direct perception. The collective mission operates on multiple levels. First, these children challenge societal definitions of value, worth, and contribution. Their presence demands that we expand beyond narrow metrics of productivity and conventional achievement to recognize the inherent dignity and purpose of all forms of consciousness. They silently yet persistently question a value system that places doing above being, achievement above presence, and conformity above authenticity. Second, they serve as catalysts for institutional transformation. Educational systems, healthcare approaches, and social support structures are being revolutionized through the necessity of accommodating different ways of perceiving and learning. What begins as adaptation for those with autism ultimately benefits all by creating more humane, responsive, and diverse approaches to human development and well-being. Third, these children initiate a collective shift toward heart-centered consciousness. In a world increasingly dominated by technological interfaces and virtual connection, children with autism often demand direct, energetic, heart-to-heart engagement. Their preference for authenticity over social performance invites everyone in their orbit to drop pretense and connect from a place of genuine presence, a revolutionary act in our increasingly artificial social landscape. The collective spiritual mission extends to the development of a more inclusive concept of human diversity. Rather than pathologizing difference, the presence of these children invites us to recognize neurodiversity as an essential aspect of human expression, a spectrum of consciousness designed to encompass different modes of perception and engagement with reality. This paradigm shift represents healing not just for individuals with autism, but for a collective consciousness that has become dangerously narrow in its definition of normal. From a spiritual perspective, these children serve as holders of specific frequencies needed for Earth's evolution at this time. Many spiritual traditions speak of the current era as one of significant transition, a shift from separation consciousness to unity awareness. Children with autism, with their different relationship to boundaries, their alternative modes of perception, and their authentic presence, embody aspects of consciousness essential for this planetary transition. As articulated by Edgar in his spiritual readings, souls often incarnate in groups with shared missions spanning generations. The souls currently incarnating with autism may represent a soul group with specific collective purpose, maintaining access to spiritual dimensions increasingly forgotten in our technological age, preserving modes of direct perception essential for humanity's continued evolution. The integration of these children into our collective experience, the accommodation of their needs, the recognition of their gifts, the adaptation to their different way of being, represents spiritual practice on a societal scale. Each accommodation made, each perspective shifted, each system redesigned contributes to a more conscious, compassionate, and spiritually aligned collective reality. In embracing both dimensions, the individual spiritual journey of parents and the collective mission these children serve, we recognize that what appears as challenge from a limited perspective reveals itself as profound grace from a spiritual viewpoint. These souls arrive not as burdens, but as perfectly designed catalysts for both personal and collective transformation, guiding humanity toward more authentic, compassionate, and spiritually aligned ways of being. Did you feel a connection with these spiritual teachings about the hidden mission of autistic souls? If this perspective resonated with you or offered a new way of understanding, please take a moment to subscribe to our channel. Your subscription helps us continue sharing these profound spiritual insights with others seeking deeper understanding. Share your experiences, questions, or reflections in the comments below. Each comment creates a community of shared wisdom where we can learn from one another's spiritual journeys. Whether you're a parent, caregiver, or simply someone exploring spiritual dimensions of human experience, your voice enriches our collective understanding. Remember, awareness leads to transformation. Subscribe now and join us on this path of spiritual discovery.